There is as much evidence against Lance Twiggs for being a co-conspirator as there is against Tyler Robinson for doing this.
How is that?
Harvey, I don't know if you know who is Lance Twiggs' lawyer, because he should get Lawyer of the Year. Because in any other jurisdiction, Lance Twiggs would be sitting right next to Tyler Robinson at the defendant's table. There is as much evidence against Lance Twiggs for being a co-conspirator as there is against Tyler Robinson for doing this.
How is that? Because I watched what happened at the preliminary hearing, and it seems like, from everything that you heard, that Lance Twiggs didn't know how Tyler Robinson felt about Charlie Kirk until after the assassination.
Yeah, except there's a couple of problems. First of all, Lance Twiggs' DNA is on items that were recovered. He has text conversations after the fact that most prosecutors I know would say are clear information or confirmation. And his statement, that taped confession / admission, whatever you want to call it, that was redacted, the 17 of the 27 minutes or whatever the whatever ended up becoming admissible, was about, as there's an expression in the law called self-serving hearsay, and that was about as self-serving hearsay as I've ever seen.
But wait a minute, wait.
How about when he's talking about inscribing the bullets? How do you explain that?
Okay, I want to get into inscribing the bullets, but inscribing a bullet, and saying catch doesn't mean that I'm going to assassinate a particular person.
Okay, and how about any of the Slack conversations, Discord conversations, other things leading up to it?
But what Lance Twiggs said, he says that Tyler Robinson said, look under your keyboard. And he looks at a note under the keyboard that says, I had an opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and I took it. And then he says, find joy in your life. I love you always. And then the response from Lance Twiggs is, you weren't the one who did it, right? And he says, I am. How is that a co-conspirator?
Well, that's the note supposedly that's conveniently found. I don't want to get too conspiratorial. I'm just telling you that based on the DNA, based on the bullets, and based on some of the other information that was elicited at this preliminary hearing, as you know, it does not take much to get somebody held to answer, meaning bound over, meaning say there's probable cause to send somebody to trial. And I'll give you one other last tidbit.
But you didn't really address. But you didn't address what I just said, which is the evidence in terms of just the texting back and forth, is that Lance Twiggs had no idea what Tyler Robinson did, and as a matter of fact, was even asked, did this guy ever talk to you about Charlie Kirk? And he said no. The only person he really talked about was Donald Trump. So when you look at all the text, and then you look at the surprise in the text messages about you weren't the one who did it, and he said, I am, that does not feel like a co-conspirator to me.
So it sounds like an affirmative defense, though. Sounds like you're arguing something that his lawyer would be arguing. What I'm telling you,
he's not charged. He's not charged.
I know he's not charged, but he was given use immunity. If he had nothing to be fearful of, that's why I said his lawyer deserves Lawyer of the Year. Not only did he get this guy use immunity, but the way this thing was presented is as if he was an innocent bystander to all of this.
If I were his lawyer, you want to get use immunity when you're talking to the police and you're talking to prosecutors when the guy you're in a relationship with, the guy you live with, has allegedly confessed to you that he was the assassin. And so Yeah, a smart lawyer.
Why do you? Well, yeah, I agree. A smart lawyer would. But if you were the client, why do you need use immunity if you didn't know anything about it?
Well,
I
maybe
mean,
you don't,
that's what
but
the public would say.
maybe you don't. But at the same time, when the lawyer got use immunity, that was very early on, and the lawyer may not have really understood what was going on with Lance, and that it, as far as he knew, maybe there was more to the story that he wasn't hearing. So, the better part of valor is to ask for use immunity before you talk to cops and prosecutors.
Well, I will tell you that if the calculation by the prosecution was, let's put on a lengthy preliminary hearing, because I think you would agree with me that most prosecutors could have put this case on
In a
in
couple
two
of days,
hours.
yes, yes,
Okay.
a day. I
So
agree.
a day at most. And I believe they haven't come out and admitted this, but I'm going to take a wild guess and say that the reason they did it over the course of the week was because they wanted to dispel kind of the disinformation, as they would call it, conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
whatever you want, that was their goal. I think that was a resounding failure,
Why?
because I think that there is even more fodder for conspiracy theorists after this preliminary hearing than before. I think this was a defense lawyer's petri dish of ammunition of which to play around with. Some of that cross examination, which the Tyler's lawyer did of the investigating officers. You didn't find this. You didn't look there. You didn't know this. You didn't look there. While that is workmanlike cross, it also points out some of I think, feeds right into the conspiracy theories in this case.
Well, I mean, look, you've got you've got ballistics, you've got DNA, and most important, you've got these text messages, because the text messages will probably be used just to show there was this contemporaneous conversation. But Lance Twiggs takes the stand in this case, and he becomes the star witness. And when the jury hears from the roommate about what Tyler Robinson said to him via text, and you can support that with the text messages, I don't see how he gets out from under a flat out confession.
But he wasn't put on the stand.
No, not in the prelim, but he didn't have to be put in the stand. He didn't.
Right.
It would have been dumb. It would have been dumb
right.
for prosecutors to put him on the stand.
For the prosecutors,
Yeah.
remember, the defense wanted him on the stand.
I know,
and in California, I think they might have had more success.
I got it.
But
he's going to
having said
testify.
that,
He's going to testify in the trial.
correct. And do you think he's going to come across the same way he did in this taped confession that was uncross-examined in the preliminary hearing? I doubt it. And you say there's DNA evidence. Guess who else's DNA was found on the gun, on the towel, and specifically mixed with Tyler Robinson, which is all explainable.
It's all explainable.
I understand that, right?
They live in the same house, Mark.
Correct. But what a coincidence.
No, it's not a coincidence. If two people live in a house and two people's DNA are in the same towel, you can easily explain. Look, what you're saying is that you think that the jury may believe that Lance Twiggs is a co-conspirator. That does not help Tyler Robinson. That's almost an admission. Yeah, I did it, but I didn't do it alone.
Well, let me tell you why that may not exactly fly. In a case like this, where there are robust conspiracy theories, where there's robust chatter, and I'm not endorsing it. So all of you who have already written down in your comments that I'm wearing my tinfoil hat or whatever, put that aside for a second. What I'm telling you is what the defense is thinking about. What the defense is thinking about is, if the prosecution is trying to put Lance Twig up there, and they did not want him to be cross-examined at a preliminary hearing. They did everything possible to avoid that. And they know they've got to put him up there to to testify at a trial, because to your point, Harvey, that is game over if he comes off like he did on the tape, correct? I mean, you would think most jurors would say, okay, that's it, real time, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But if he is cross-examined and vigorously cross-examined, and jurors start to say, wait a second here, why did this guy get use immunity? He looks like he's involved here. And they start to doubt the transparency or the authenticity of the prosecution, that presents a problem.
No, but
That
again,
is a problem
Mark,
in this case.
Mark, it gets right back to, first of all, you're kind of going against your theory. You're acting like the prosecutors did everything they could to keep Lance Twiggs off the stand. Well, you said at the beginning of this, there should have been a 2-hour prelim. And in a 2-hour prelim, you call the cops and you maybe show the text messages of the alleged confession and call it a day, and the judge is going to say probable cause. So there would be no reason for the prosecutors to give the defense a dry run on Lance Twiggs. There'd be no reason. But even if,
so
how
is that cut across the theory?
Well,
they played this video for one reason and one reason only: to try to debunk conspiracy theories.
I know, but the best case scenario for Tyler Robinson, based on what you're saying, is Tyler Robinson assassinated Charlie Kirk, but he had help. I mean, that's your theory. That doesn't get him out of the death penalty.
No, not necessarily.
Sure,
what I'm saying is, if you're a juror who's looking at this askance, if you're saying, and technically that's what you're supposed to do, beyond a reasonable doubt means you do not accept what is being told to you unless you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. And if all of a sudden what you're being told about Lance Twiggs starts to disintegrate and starts to not hang with the rest of the evidence, or it looks like he's been giving a pass, then you start to doubt everything else about the prosecution. There is a jury instruction in almost every jurisdiction. A witness willfully false about one thing that is material can be disbelieved about everything else.
I totally understand that. But how do you get around Twiggs saying that he was told to look under the computer and there was a note that says, I had an opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and I took it. He says goodbye. And then texts Tyler Robinson, you weren't the one who did it, right? And he said, I am. How do you get around that?
Well, the person who is already looking critically at the prosecution's presentation is going to say, wow, doesn't this sound a little scripted? I mean, there has been, and I'm not talking about just generally the how do I put this gently? The crowd that wouldn't believe that the sky is blue when you wake up in the morning. I'm talking about people who are a little doubtful at the nicely packaged piece that they've been given. And I just wonder if people start to doubt things. I don't think the prosecution was successful in their attempt to use this, for lack of a better term, as a dog and pony show to debunk conspiracy theories.
Well, maybe, okay, and look, and I agree with that, but I agree with that based on the climate, which is that there is a whole community out there that will create a conspiracy theory about just about anything. And yes, I think, by the way, I think Erica Kirk wanted a lot of this public for that very reason, to try to debunk some of these things. And you're not going to be able to do that in this climate in 2026. I agree with that. But at the same time, I would assume that the police not only seized Tyler Robinson's phone, but has a mirror of what was texted back and forth between him and Lance Twiggs. And if the two align, then it's a confession.
If they've got you're right, if they have search warrants that get downloads from the cloud, or they've got a mirror image of the phone and the phone does not have spoofing spyware or something along those lines. I've had murder cases where spoofing software was installed on the phone. I can name you repeated things where there were
Well, they'll
texts
be able
that
to
were
see that.
found
They'll
on
be able to
somebody's.
see that,
Yes,
right?
they'll be able to see that exactly.
Okay, and
And
assuming that's not the case,
if
then
it's not the case,
it's a
yes, but
confession.
but the question still remains, and I guess my point is, if this was an effort to try to get to debunk the conspiracy theories, I don't think it worked. In fact, I think it had the opposite effect.
Okay, maybe you're right. I want to ask you something else. Donald
Okay.
Trump Jr. showed up and during one of the days of the prelim. Um, is this a mistake, especially for prosecutors? And obviously, Erica Kirk is aligned with prosecutors in this case. Is it a mistake for him to show up? Because, look, there's already a political undertone, if not overtone, to the whole case. Because it really is about, what was his motivation. And he talks about that, Tyler Robinson has. And so by Donald Trump Jr. being there, does that not have the potential of polarizing the jury in a bad way for prosecutors?
Potentially, and it would be something you would have to plumb in jury selection. Utah is kind of an interesting place. I've tried jury trials in Utah. Utah is independent. I mean, as a generalization, you will remember third party candidates have done well there, and it's been kind of against the grain in certain aspects. It's not in lockstep with national Republican politics generally, or for a large part. But yes, is Donald Trump Jr. as the president's son polarizing? Yeah, in a lot of circles, I'm sure he is, and that would include a jury. But remember, when you say Erica Kirk is aligned with the prosecution, I don't know how aligned she is with the prosecution. Her lawyer utilized the Marcy's Law equivalent, which is their version
Right.
of the Victims' Bill of Rights. He got up there and he was arguing to the judge. He wanted the entire Lance Twiggs tape out in the public. The judge did not do that. I think that was the right call by the judge, by the way. And the fact remains, and I mentioned this before, if Erica Kirk was totally aligned with the prosecution, there's nothing prohibiting them from showing the entire tape to Erica Kirk or her lawyer and sharing that with her. But my guess is that the prosecutor was trying to not paint the jury pool for fear coming on the heels. Didn't this prosecutor already get his hands slapped because of saying something to TMZ?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think so. I think this prosecutor
What you
got a
mean? You mean
little got a little bench slapped
he
about
pulled
a
a Geragos?
TMZ. Yeah, apparently, yes. It would not be. I feel his pain as the as one of the six pack of TMZ OSCs. So Ray contempt.
So they didn't allow all of it in with Lance
Correct.
Twiggs, but that doesn't mean they're not going to allow all of it in the trial.
I don't think it comes in the trial. I think in the trial, since it's pure hearsay, it would not come in. And if to the point we were discussing before, if they wanted to do a hearsay prelim, just a pure 2 hour hearsay prelim, they could have put the investigating officer up there, had him say what Lance said, had him say what the text said, have him say what the coroner revealed, and be on their way and tell the judge, now you can hold him to answer. I mean, mind you, as we're taping this, he has not, their probable cause finding has not been made
It's
at
not going to
this
happen
point.
until September 1st now. They've, for whatever
Right.
reason, postponed this until September 1st, which is crazy.
Well,
I know. I was shocked at
I
that.
think what they did is both sides requested, they wanted to brief the matter. I've done that in a lengthy preliminary
The
hearing,
defense
meaning
is
you've
going to
got,
lose. I don't know why the defense is going through the motions here. They're going to lose this. I mean, the judge is going to
well,
find probable cause.
look, you've heard me say this before. Probable cause has devolved to the point where is my client breathing? I say that with a
Yeah, but
hat tip to it. In this
there is
case, right?
probable cause. In this case,
Correct.
there is absolutely
Correct.
probable
There's
cause.
absolutely
So
probable cause
why are
in
they
this case.
delaying this? I mean,
I,
what you could almost waive it, right?
You could, but I think there is a strategic importance to the defense making a record on quite a bit of the legal issues that they objected to in real time. And I also think this judge, contrary, and I've had this fight commenting in other forums, a lot of people have criticized this judge. I think this judge has done an outstanding job. I think he has listened. I think he has weighed the defendant's right to counsel and cross-examination, Sixth Amendment right, against the public's right to know, First Amendment right, and he's done it in a thoughtful way. I've been very impressed with him.
Can I tell you something that I've just been thinking about all week as I watch this? I think there is a danger on the part of the prosecution if they go down a road. And I've watched this where now they're getting into DNA and whether the DNA samples were handled correctly. And, you know, the defense raises it and almost baits the prosecution into defending the DNA and all. You know, what I'm thinking about, and I remember covering it and being stunned by it, I'm thinking way back to the beginning of my career when, as a reporter, when I covered the Twilight Zone case, when John Landis was accused of manslaughter in the death of Vic Morrow, the actor, and two children when he was flying a helicopter over a body of water in the middle of the night for a Twilight Zone movie. And the helicopter hit the water and decapitated Vic Morrow and killed the two kids.
For $200, Harvey, who was Leah D'Agostino?
Leah D'Agostino was the prosecutor in the case. Harlan Braun was the defense lawyer.
I was just going to say for $500, who was Harlan?
It was Harlan. And the reason I'm raising it is this, that the prosecution lost that case. And they lost that case because Harlan Braun baited them and started talking about the aerodynamics of a helicopter and how it would be unforeseeable that with the wind that was blowing that night, and then the defense and the prosecution then bites and then starts to argue aerodynamics of a helicopter. And this whole thing gets jumbled into all this technical stuff. And the jury didn't understand it. And at a point, they're just saying, not guilty on manslaughter. All they had to say was, the prosecution should just say, look, Vic Morrow sent a helicopter 100 feet over the ground where they're blowing wind right above 3 human beings in the middle of the night. So how much of a rocket scientist does it take to say, that's reckless. That's ridiculous. When wind is blowing like that and the helicopter is that low, this was an accident waiting to happen, period. But she went down that road of trying to get so technical. And I think DNA is the equivalent of that. I think they should stick to confession that Lance Twiggs didn't know anything about it. He starts raising it. There's a note. The guy confesses, and you just don't bite the bait.
It's interesting. You mentioned Harlan, and Harlan did an incredible job in that case. Do you remember the other lawyer from Nashville, Tennessee? So I'm going to really test your memory.
Yeah, I do, but I forgot his name.
James Neal.
Oh, right.
And James Neal was a legendary trial lawyer who came out here and I think represented Landis.
So am I wrong about this? That you stick to the high points and you don't get involved in the minutia in something like this because they're raising all these DNA issues that to me are, you know, it's like, really, you want to get into the hand towel? Yeah, they live together. Okay, they dried their hand on the same towel. Leave it at that.
And I, you know, I'm thinking about something that Neil told me during that trial about the kind of the overcomplication of the presentation. And he was telling me back then, I was much younger, obviously,
well, so was I.
And a newer lawyer. And he was talking about how it should, to your point, maybe it's rattling around in the back of your mind. There could have just been kind of res ipsa loquitur, borrowing from the civil, where, you know, it happened, it was on their watch. Why are we overcomplicating this?
Right.
As opposed to getting into the mechanics of it. Sometimes when you get and I've noticed this often, when you get too far down the road in having experts try to explain what is obvious, you end up getting people's minds to boggle at the obvious. And I think that was what happened in that case.
So in this case with Tyler Robinson, if he is found guilty, how is this not a death penalty case?
Well,
Especially with the engravings and the bullets, catch and all of that. Everything he said, the cold-bloodedness of it all, the visual of it happening. When you see all of that, and then you see Erica Kirk in court, how is this not a death penalty case?
so one of the interesting things about Lance Twiggs also is they got in kind of this confession, I did it. There was also an aspect of that is I wish I hadn't, or I regret it, or
Yeah.
something like that. Now, if you're the defense lawyer in the guilt phase and you're doing a robust cross-examination of this guy and you're trying to discredit him, and then your client gets convicted and you're in the penalty phase, how do you now handle probably the greatest piece of remorse in a penalty phase of I regret it or I wish I hadn't done it? Because you're going to put on the person that you've savaged in the guilt phase and now want them to be the perfect historian of of the immediate remorse. It's kind of the trial giveth and the trial taketh away at the same time. It's a fundamental conundrum.
Help me out here, and I'm just doing this based on recollection. Did he not go to Chick-fil-A after?
I want to say yes.
I think he
know
went
Chick-fil-A.
Can I tell you,
participated
that's
in this, yes.
If I'm right on that, man, that is a marker for the jury when it comes to penalty. Well, a marker for anybody who's sentencing.
Where was Luigi found? Wasn't Luigi found in a fast food place?
Days later. He was found in a McDonald's, but it was days later.
Okay, so Chick-fil-A has got more of a attraction than McDonald's does.
My point is that it's contemporaneous. But look, I don't see how this does not become a death penalty case if he's convicted. I don't understand. I don't understand how that can be.
Well, I know one of the interesting things, I've talked to you about this before, is when people come in jury selection. In fact, the reason the Scott Peterson's penalty phase death was reversed was because when you're doing the voir dire of the jurors, you ask them, do you have a philosophical objection to the death penalty? What was happening in Scott's case is jurors who said, yes, I do, the judge was excusing. And the California Supreme Court reversed that and said, no, you need to ask the next question, which is what I kept saying to Judge DeLuca. You need to ask, can you set that aside? So you have to talk to people. It's all going to come out in jury selection. And unfortunately, I think that if there is a jury that convicts and you've savaged kind of Twiggs along the way, that it becomes exponentially more difficult to try to save him, because you can hear the argument of the prosecution. The prosecution is going to argue this is the ultimate thought crime, that Charlie Kirk was assassinated because of his thoughts, because of his speech. And if that isn't the ultimate kind of threat to democracy and the First Amendment, then what is?
In a way, that's what Charlie Kirk would say out loud to groups about, the ability to speak freely and whatnot. It's interesting you say that, because in jury selection, I don't think it matters whether somebody is on the left or the right. I think that people on the left who may not agree with anything Charlie Kirk said, for the most part, think what happened was abhorrent. And I don't think this is going to be a case where, oh God, prosecutors don't want Democrats because Democrats are not going to embrace what happened, embrace the crime. I think they would. I think they would feel the same weight of this crime as Republicans would.
I think probably the most horrific thing of all is the video of the killing. I mean, it's look, I've been to autopsies. I've seen crime scene photos for 40 years. That ranks as one of the most abhorrent kind of visuals that I can remember. It sticks with you.
Does the defense try and keep that video out, arguing that it's overly prejudicial?
Well, I think they do, and I think that's a losing
Yeah.
argument. I think probably they would never admit this, but probably at some point you're going to want to play it so many times to try to desensitize people to it. That's such a um, talk about a fool's errand any way you go. I don't know that that's ever a winning hand. It's just a disturbing video to watch somebody talking full of life, to be so young,
And
and
in
then
an
to
instant,
explode. Yeah,
yeah,
instant is just taken
it's
away.
horrendous.
It's really troubling, beyond troubling. And I don't know how you sit if you're a relative and watch things like that.
And finally, well, Erica Kirk left the courtroom when they played. Well, they played it for the
Rightfully
judge.
so.
Yeah. Um, Finally, would either side, or well, certainly the defense, would they try and change venue here?
You know, I think what the judge was doing, and people don't quite understand this when they were criticizing him about redactions or what the public was going to hear or see. I think he was trying to not go there. I think he was trying to help contain. He did a masterful job of, as I mentioned before, balancing the First and the Sixth Amendment. But at a certain point, is he in jury selection? Because all judges end up saying, I'll deal with that, or I'm going to punt it down to jury selection. If you get to jury selection, everybody comes and says, undoubtedly, I've heard about it or I know about it. Can you set that aside? If they can't set that aside, there's a real problem.
Yeah, but if
And I
but
think he was
why would you assume
anticipating that.
somebody in New Jersey could set it aside?
I don't know that you could. And that's I remember once again using Judge DeLucchi in Modesto, or I mean in San Mateo, used to say to me, "Mr. Geragos, where do you want me to send this jury? Into a capsule in outer space to circle the Earth? There's no place to put them."
Yeah. Okay, well, for whatever reason, this prelim has been pushed, so we will see. See you next
We
week.
will see. Thanks, Harvey.
See you
See you
next
next
week.
week.